Hello, government students. This is Mrs. Politsky, and I have your notes for Chapter 4, Section 2, Relations between the National and State Government. So, here we go. How states must honor one another's laws. Well, we understand that states, for the most part, have to get along. And there are basically three kind of items that I want to kind of talk a little bit about. I want to talk about full faith and credit, privileges and immunities, and this thing called extradition. So, we're going to start with the full faith and credit. And what that basically means is that each state must recognize the laws and the legal proceedings of another state. So if I happen to be uh, driving through Nebraska and I'm from another state, uh, they're going to have to respect the state of Nebraska. It's going to have to respect that other state's driver's registration, probably license and such on their car. We also have to respect the birth records. So if a person is not born in this state and they come to live here from another state, we recognize the birth records that everything is good. Okay. Privileges and immunities. This basically means that one state may not discriminate unreasonably against citizens of another state. So, an example would be citizens can pass through a state, live in states other than the one which they were born, or make contracts with people outside of the state, or marry someone outside of the state, or hold property. All those kind of things we do have to respect in one way or another. Extradition, on the other hand, has a lot to do with criminal proceedings. And so, what this basically means that is if a person is charged with crimes like treason or a felony, or other kind of crimes, and they leave the state, their home state, the governor of the state which the person has fled to is responsible for returning that fugitive. So when you flee your home state for another state, that is basically a federal crime because you're avoiding prosecution, and hence you might have taken something that might have been, I don't want to say a minor situation, but you've elevated it, obviously, by leaving the state and going elsewhere. All right. Interstate compacts and lawsuits. So, we're going to talk a little bit about some reasons for initiating these and also handling these. First of all, when we talk about interstate compacts, these are, for the most part, um, agreements with other states for controlling things like air and water pollution, managing like toll bridges or transportation in general, conserving wildlife, fish, water resources, coal, oil, or handling the disposal of hazardous waste. When we talk about how they're handled, typically a compact is signed by parties of the agreement. And that could be a minimum of two states, but a lot of times it's several different states that are involved in this. Okay, once this agreement has been put together, then it goes to Congress, and Congress has to approve it. And if somebody doesn't, hold up their end of the deal here, you could sue just like you would in regular contractual law. And so the terms would then be enforced by the U.S. Supreme Court. Okay, so uh, when you talk about the state of Nebraska, we have in the past got in trouble over an issue of handling hazardous waste. There had been a proposed, basically low level nuclear waste dump that had been proposed to be built in Nebraska up by Butte. Okay, not very far from the Niobrara River and such. Um, the people up in that area in Boyd County did not want this dump, and they protested it. And eventually, the state of Nebraska um, basically said that they were going to pull out of this compact. Well, the problem was there were other states that were planning to dump their waste within that dump, and the state of Nebraska got sued, and we lost in the U.S. Supreme Court, which basically meant that because we didn't uphold our end of the contract, we ended up having to pay millions upon millions of dollars to these other states that were members of this compact. So that's an interstate compact. They are very powerful agreements, and certainly if you don't live up to it, you can get in trouble. All right, when we talk about interstate lawsuits, if states can't handle the differences within the compacts, the interstate compacts, what will often happen is a lawsuit. And interstate lawsuits are always heard by the U.S. Supreme Court. Okay, that's really the purpose of the court, is to be the kind of the fair grounds to have these cases heard. But it is the only court in which one state can sue another, and hence that's why we have to have these heard in the Supreme Court. Right, guarantees and obligations of the states. Some guarantees to the states. This is basically made by our federal government, but that is to help maintain that Republican form of government. Anytime we talk about the word Republican, we're talking about like a representative form of government. Protecting states from invasion or any kind of domestic unrest. So if there would be an invasion from maybe a foreign country, or one state would go into rebellion, much like what we had during the Civil War, the federal government's there to protect us. And respect of the territorial integrity of each state. So the boundaries that we have, the federal government is going to respect that. And occasionally there will be lawsuits that will come through the courts to kind of, redefine that. State of Nebraska has had this happen. With some of its neighbors, particularly with the eastern boundary of our state along the Missouri River. The Missouri River at one point in time was not channelized. It did not have kind of the stable, basically riverbed that it has currently, and occasionally the river would move. Okay, and so using the river to determine the state boundary is kind of a problem. At one point in time, the river had moved after our state had, or territory had been defined. And what ended up happening is, for many years, people who were living in states like Missouri and Iowa assumed that they were living in those states, but truth be it, they were actually living in what was Nebraska. And they ended up having to pay back taxes and things like that for land that, for the most part, is basically part of Nebraska. Obligations to the states that are states have to do these things. We have to conduct and pay for elections of all national government officials. We also have to participate in the process of amending the Constitution when those amendments come our way. And that doesn't happen very often, though. All right. Thank you very much.